The planet Krevthar burned red under twin suns. The air tasted like copper and ash. Across the rocky landscape, massive creatures moved with deadly purpose. These were the Valthrek, and they ruled everything they touched. Raxval stood on the observation deck of his fortress, looking down at the hunting grounds below. He was 3 meters tall, covered in thick armored scales that had turned gray with age and countless battles. His claws could tear through steel. His teeth could crush bone. Scars covered his body like medals of honor. Each one told a story of a hunt, a kill, a victory. For 300 years, Raxval had hunted. He had tracked prey across frozen worlds where the cold could freeze blood in seconds. He had stalked creatures through toxic jungles where the plants themselves tried to kill you. He had faced down beasts that breathed fire, shot poison, and could read minds. He had killed them all. The Valthrek were born hunters. Their entire culture celebrated the kill. Young warriors earned their names through their first successful hunt. Leaders were chosen by how many dangerous creatures they had killed. Their greatest structures were built from the bones of their prey. Their most valuable art was made from the hides of extinct species they had hunted to death. But lately, Raxval felt something he had never experienced before. Boredom. He had hunted everything. The challenge was gone. Even the most dangerous creatures in the known galaxy had become predictable. They all ran. They all hid. They all died the same way. His second-in-command, Velkor, approached with careful steps. Even among the Valthrek, Raxval commanded respect and fear. "Commander," Velkor said, lowering his head in submission. "The scouts have returned from the Outer Rim. They have found something interesting." Raxval turned slowly. His electromagnetic senses pulsed, reading Velkor's nervous excitement. "Speak." "A new planet. They call it Earth. It orbits a yellow star in Sector 973. The planet is rich with predators, large aquatic hunters with rows of teeth, massive reptiles that can crush prey in their jaws, furred beasts with claws and fangs that hunt in groups." "We have seen such things before," Raxval said, turning back to the window. "Yes, Commander, but there is more. The dominant species on this planet are strange. They call themselves humans. They are weak by our standards. No natural armor, no claws, no venom, soft skin, poor senses. Yet somehow they dominate their world. They have conquered every environment. They have killed or controlled every predator on their planet." This caught Raxval's attention. "How?" "The scouts are not certain. The humans use tools. They work in groups. They plan ahead. They seem to think differently than any prey species we have encountered. Our analysts believe they might provide interesting sport." Raxval's eyes narrowed. A prey species that dominated predators? Impossible, yet intriguing. "There is one more thing," Velkor continued. "The scouts found records of a small creature on Earth. It is called a honey badger. It weighs perhaps 15 kilograms, but the humans fear it. They tell stories about it. The creature attacks animals 50 times its size. It survives venom that would kill most beings. It never retreats. It never submits. The humans have a saying about it. Honey badger don't care." For the first time in decades, Raxval felt a spark of genuine interest. A tiny creature that made a dominant species nervous, a prey animal that attacked instead of fleeing. "Bring them both," Raxval commanded. "One human, one of these honey badgers. I want to see if they live up to their reputation." Velkor hesitated. "Commander, taking specimens from an uncontacted world violates Galactic Council regulations. If we are discovered..." Raxval's hand shot out faster than thought. His claws stopped a hair's width from Velkor's throat. "Do you question me?" "No, Commander, I will prepare the retrieval team immediately." 3 weeks later, the hunting ship returned to Krevthar. The crew moved with unusual tension. Something about this mission had unsettled them. Raxval met them in the cargo bay. 2 containment units sat on the loading platform, surrounded by force fields that flickered with dangerous energy. The crew kept their distance. "Report," Raxval ordered. The team leader, a young hunter named Crescenal, stepped forward. His armor showed fresh damage. Claw marks. Bite marks. Commander, the specimens are secured, but the retrieval was difficult. Difficult? Raxval moved toward the containers. You are trained warriors. You faced 2 small creatures from a death world barely advanced enough for space travel. Yes, Commander. The human put up minimal resistance. We took him from an isolated area while he was studying animals. But the honey badger. Kresnal gestured to his damaged armor. It attacked us immediately. It showed no fear. Our weapons barely slowed it. It fought until the stun field finally overwhelmed it. Even then it tried to attack. 3 of my team required medical treatment. Raxval looked at the first container. Inside, a human male sat on the floor, watching everything with sharp eyes. He was smaller than Raxval expected, maybe 1.8 meters tall. His skin was pale brown. His hair was dark and cut short. He wore simple clothing torn from the capture, but his eyes showed intelligence. He was studying his captors the way a hunter studies prey. The second container held something that made Raxval pause. The honey badger was smaller than he expected, barely larger than his forearm. Its fur was black and white. Its claws were tiny compared to his own, yet it threw itself repeatedly at the force field, biting at the energy, digging at the floor, never stopping, never tiring. Its eyes showed no fear, only rage, only defiance. The human has tried to communicate, Kresnal reported. He uses various sound patterns. He has drawn mathematical symbols on the container walls. He appears to be attempting first contact protocols. Intelligent prey, Raxval mused. And the creature? It has attempted to escape 273 times since capture. It has tested every centimeter of its containment. It has tried to bite through the force field 47 times despite the pain feedback. It does not sleep. It does not rest. It simply attacks. Raxval felt something he had not felt in years. Anticipation. Perhaps this would be interesting after all. Prepare them for release into the hunting grounds, he ordered. Tomorrow at dawn, we hunt. Alert my elite pack. Tell them we face something new, something that might actually fight back. As the crew moved to obey, Raxval watched the 2 containers. The human was still watching him, still analyzing. The honey badger was still attacking its prison, tireless and fearless. In his 300 years of hunting, Raxval had learned to read prey. Fear had a smell. Submission had a posture. Defeat had a sound. But looking at these 2 creatures from Earth, he sensed none of these things. For just a moment, something cold touched his spine. A feeling he did not recognize because he had never felt it before. The first whisper of doubt. Taeho Kim woke up with a splitting headache. The last thing he remembered was walking through the Kalahari Desert, tracking a honey badger for his research project. Then the sky had torn open with blue light. Now he was somewhere else entirely. He sat up slowly and looked around. The room was maybe 4 meters square. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. One wall was completely transparent, showing a corridor beyond. The air smelled wrong, like ozone and something metallic he could not identify. Taeho was a scientist. He had studied xenobiology for 12 years, though until now that had meant studying animals on Earth. His mind immediately began working through the problem. He had been abducted. The technology around him was far beyond anything humans had created. Therefore aliens existed. Therefore he was in serious trouble. He stood and walked to the transparent wall. It was not glass. When he touched it, his hand met resistance but also a strange tingling sensation. Force field, he thought. Like in science fiction movies. Except this was real. Through the transparent barrier he could see other rooms. Most were empty. But in one room nearby he saw something that made his heart beat faster. A honey badger. Not just any honey badger, but one he recognized. The white stripe pattern was distinctive. This was the same animal he had been tracking when the abduction happened. The honey badger was not acting normal. Most animals, when placed in a strange environment, would show fear. They would hide in corners. They would freeze. They would try to make themselves small. Not this one. The honey badger was systematically testing every part of its prison. It bit the force field, yelped at the shock, then bit it again. It dug at the floor, finding no weakness, then tried the walls. It jumped at the ceiling. It never stopped moving. It never stopped fighting. Tahoe had studied honey badgers for 3 years. He knew they were tough. He knew they were fearless. But watching this animal refuse to give up even in the face of alien technology was something else entirely. Movement in the corridor caught his attention. Something large walked past. Tahoe pressed closer to the barrier, trying to get a better look. The creature was massive, at least 3 meters tall. It walked on 2 legs like a human, but that was where the similarity ended. Its body was covered in thick scales that looked like armor. Its head was reptilian with eyes that glowed faintly. Its hands ended in claws that could easily tear a human apart. When it opened its mouth to speak to another of its kind, Tahoe saw rows of sharp teeth. These were his captors, aliens, predators. And from the way they looked at him and the honey badger, Tahoe realized something chilling. They did not see specimens for study. They saw prey. For the next several hours, more of the aliens came to observe. They made sounds that might have been language. They pointed at him and the honey badger. Some of them had damaged armor. One had bandages wrapped around its arm. Tahoe noticed the wounds looked like bite marks, small bite marks. He looked back at the honey badger in the next cell. The animal had managed to injure these massive predators during capture. That was both impressive and terrifying. Tahoe forced himself to think like a scientist. He needed information. He began testing his prison systematically. The force field shocked him when he touched it, but the shock was not strong enough to cause serious damage. It was designed to contain, not to harm. That was useful to know. He found that the floor was made of some kind of metal, but it was warm to the touch. Heated from below, probably. The air circulation came from vents too small to crawl through. The room had no furniture, no objects he could use as tools or weapons. His captors were not stupid, but they had made mistakes. They had left him his clothes. The laces in his boots were synthetic fiber, strong and flexible. The metal grommets in the laces could be removed. His belt buckle was steel. Small things, but a scientist learned to work with what he had. More importantly, they had placed him where he could see the honey badger, and he suspected that was intentional. They wanted to see if the 2 Earth creatures would react to each other. Tahoe sat down and began to plan. He had advantages his captors might not understand. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They did not have claws or armor or venom. But humans were smart. Humans used tools. Humans planned ahead. And humans were very, very good at surviving. The aliens returned in greater numbers. One of them, larger and more scarred than the others, stood in front of Tahoe's cell for a long time. It studied him the way Tahoe had studied animals in the wild. This one was the leader. Tahoe could tell by how the others deferred to it. The leader made a series of sounds and gestures. Other aliens operated controls that Tahoe could not see. Suddenly, the honey badger's cell began to move. The entire room was being transported somewhere. Then Tahoe's cell began to move too. The floor vibrated. The walls around him shifted. He was being taken somewhere. The leader walked alongside his cell, watching him constantly. They traveled through corridors lit by the same sourceless blue light. Tahoe tried to memorize the route, counting turns, estimating distances. They passed rooms full of strange equipment. They passed what looked like weapons mounted on walls. They passed other cells containing creatures Tahoe had never seen before. Some looked like they were from Earth's evolutionary past. Others were completely alien. This was not a research facility. This was a collection, a zoo, or worse, a hunting reserve. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. One wall was completely transparent, showing a landscape outside that made Tahoe's breath catch. Rolling hills covered in strange vegetation, rocky outcrops, dense jungle in the distance, a toxic-looking swamp. And scattered throughout, he could see other animals, other creatures wandering or hiding. It was an arena, a hunting ground, and he and the honey badger were about to be released into it. The leader alien made more sounds. It seemed pleased. It gestured to Tahoe and then to the landscape beyond, then made a gesture across its throat. The meaning was clear. Tomorrow you die. But Tahoe did not look away. He met the alien's eyes and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, "You made a mistake. You think I am prey? You are wrong." The alien tilted its head, confused by this response. Prey were supposed to show fear. This human showed something else entirely. In the next transport cell, the honey badger had finally stopped attacking the barriers. It was watching the landscape beyond, watching the alien guards, watching everything. Its small eyes were calculating, planning. Two creatures from Earth, separated by evolution and biology, were both thinking the same thing. How do we survive? How do we fight back? How do we win? The aliens had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had hunted everything. They had conquered everything. They thought they knew what prey looked like. They were about to learn they were wrong. Dawn came to the hunting grounds with a blood-red sky. Two suns rose over the alien landscape, casting long shadows across the twisted terrain. Somewhere in the distance, something screamed. It was not a sound any Earth creature would make. Tejo felt the force field around his transport cell disappear. The walls retracted into the ground. He was free. He stood on a rocky hillside covered in vegetation that looked like purple ferns but smelled like rotting meat. Below him stretched a valley filled with strange forests. Above him, rocky cliffs rose toward the red sky. He wore only his torn field clothes. No weapons, no supplies, no communication device. The aliens had stripped him of everything except the basics, but they had not taken his mind. From speakers hidden somewhere in the landscape, a sound echoed across the valley. It was a roar, deep and triumphant. The hunting call. The aliens were coming. Tejo did not run, not yet. He dropped to his knees and began examining the ground. The purple plants were tough but flexible. He pulled several up by the roots. The roots were thick and fibrous. Good. He found rocks, testing their weight and hardness. Some crumbled. Others were solid and heavy. He selected 3 good stones. In his years studying predators, Tejo had learned something important. Predators expected prey to run. They expected panic. They expected fear-driven mistakes. The key to surviving a predator was doing the unexpected. He moved quickly but carefully into the forest below. The trees here were massive, with bark that felt like rough leather. The canopy above was thick, blocking most of the light. Good. Darkness was a human advantage. Human eyes were good at seeing in low light compared to many Earth predators. Maybe these aliens were the same. Tejo found a stream running through the forest. The water glowed faintly blue. Probably toxic. He did not drink. Instead, he followed the stream until he found what he was looking for. Mud. Deep, thick mud on the stream bank. He covered himself in the mud, working it into his hair, his clothes, his skin. It smelled terrible, but that was good. It would mask his human scent. The mud was cold and made his skin tingle. Possibly acidic. He would have to wash it off eventually. But for now it was camouflage. Moving deeper into the forest, he found a clearing where several large boulders formed a natural bottleneck. Perfect. He began to work, using everything he had learned about physics, leverage, and trap-making. He tied the plant fibers together, creating a crude rope. He positioned one of the large rocks at the top of a slope, held in place by a trigger system made from branches and his makeshift rope. It was basic. It was primitive. But it would work. He spent the next hour creating more traps, a pit covered with branches and leaves, sharpened sticks positioned at angles in narrow passages, trip lines that would alert him to movement. The aliens were stronger and tougher than him, but they were also bigger. They would not see the small details. That was their weakness. Somewhere in the distance, he heard roaring. The aliens were spreading out, searching. Good, let them search. Let them think he was running in panic. On the other side of the hunting grounds, the honey badger known as Striker was also free. Unlike Tejo, Striker did not spend time on elaborate plans. Striker did what honey badgers always did. Striker attacked. The small animal moved through the alien landscape with absolute confidence. Fear was not in its nature. It smelled something large and predatory nearby. Most animals would hide. Striker charged toward it. The Valthrek warrior named Threshkar was searching the eastern section of the grounds. He was young by his species standards, only 50 years old. This was his first hunt for exotic prey. He expected this to be easy. The small Earth creature would run. He would chase. He would kill. He would earn honor. He never saw Striker coming. The honey badger attacked from behind, leaping onto the alien's lower leg and biting down with incredible force. Threshkar roared in pain and surprise. He tried to shake the creature off. Striker held on, teeth sinking deeper. Threshkar slashed with his claws, catching Striker across the side. The cuts were deep. They should have been fatal, but honey badger skin was loose and thick. The claws cut through but did not reach vital organs. Stryker let go, rolled, and immediately attacked again, this time going for the vulnerable joints in Threshkar's armor. The alien warrior was trained for combat. He was strong and fast, but he had never fought anything like this. The creature was too small, too quick, and completely unafraid. When he injected venom through his claws, the creature barely slowed down. Honey badgers had evolved resistance to some of the deadliest venoms on Earth. This alien toxin was powerful, but not powerful enough. Threshkar made a decision he had never made before in a hunt. He retreated. Bleeding from multiple wounds, his armor damaged, his pride shattered, he activated his communication device and called for help. Raxval heard the call with disbelief. One of his warriors retreating from a creature that weighed 15 kilograms. Impossible. Yet the biosensor data confirmed it. Threshkar was injured. Badly injured. All hunters converge on Sector 7, Raxval commanded. We have an aggressive prey. Treat it as dangerous. But even as he gave the command, another alert came through. Kolvex, one of his veteran warriors, had stopped transmitting. His life signs were weak. Raxval and 3 other hunters rushed to Kolvex's last known position. They found him in a forest clearing, pinned beneath a massive boulder. His legs were crushed. Sharpened wooden stakes had pierced his armor in multiple places. Blood pooled around him. What happened? Raxval demanded. Kolvex, struggling to breathe, gestured weakly. Trap. The human set a trap. I did not see it. I triggered it and... He coughed, blood in his mouth. Commander, that creature is not prey. It thinks like a hunter. Raxval looked around the clearing with new eyes. The trap was crude but effective. It used simple physics and natural materials. But the positioning was perfect. The trigger was hidden. This was not random. This was planned. This was intelligent. He activated his communication system to warn the other hunters. But before he could speak, he saw something that made his blood run cold. On a nearby tree, scratched into the bark with a sharp stone, were symbols. Mathematical equations, human writing, and one message in the universal trade language that the aliens had taught to many species. The message said, "You are the prey now." Raxval felt that strange, cold feeling again. The feeling he had tried to ignore. It had a name, though he had never experienced it personally. Other species felt it. Prey felt it, but not the Valthrek. Never the Valthrek. The feeling was fear. 2 other warriors arrived to help Kolvex. Raxval gathered the remaining hunters. Of his elite pack of 12, 2 were now seriously injured. The hunt had barely begun. New strategy, he commanded. We hunt in pairs. No one moves alone. These prey are dangerous. Treat them as hostile hunters, not fleeing animals. His warriors nodded, but he could sense their confusion. Their entire worldview was based on being the apex predator. Now that worldview was cracking. Somewhere in the forest, Taiho watched from a high tree branch. He had seen the aliens discover his trap. He had seen their reaction to his message. Good. Fear was a weapon. Uncertainty was a weapon. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but he had one advantage they did not understand. Humans had been prey once, long ago. His ancestors had been hunted by lions and leopards and countless other predators. But humans had learned. They had adapted. They had turned the tables. Now humans were the apex predator on Earth, not because they were strongest, because they were smartest. And somewhere out there, a honey badger that did not care about being small or outnumbered was hunting aliens who had never imagined prey could hunt back. The hunt had begun. But the aliens were learning a terrible lesson. On Earth, the definitions of predator and prey were not as simple as they thought. 3 days had passed since the hunt began. The hunting grounds had become a nightmare for the Valthrek. Of the 12 elite warriors who started the hunt, only 6 remained in fighting condition. 2 were dead. 4 were critically injured, and Raxval could not understand how it had happened. The Valthrek had hunted creatures with acid blood. They had tracked prey that could turn invisible. They had faced down beasts that could regenerate from any wound. But they had never faced prey that hunted them back. Prey that learned. Prey that planned. Raxval stood in the command center watching the monitoring displays. The screens showed different sections of the hunting grounds. Most of his warriors had pulled back to defensive positions waiting for reinforcements. The mighty hunters were now hiding from their prey. On one screen, he watched the honey badger. The creature had killed another of his warriors 2 hours ago. Venlar had been an experienced hunter with 70 successful kills. The honey badger had ambushed him near a water source, attacked his eyes and throat, and left him bleeding out before help could arrive. The small earth creature showed no signs of fatigue despite multiple injuries. It just kept fighting. On another screen, Raxval saw evidence of the human's latest trap. Smoke rose from a section of forest where the human had set a fire. The smoke was thick and dark, interfering with the Valthrek electromagnetic senses. 2 warriors had gotten separated in the smoke. One of them had fallen into a pit lined with sharpened stakes. The other had been struck by falling rocks arranged in a deadfall trap. The human was using the environment as a weapon. Every natural feature became a tool. Every animal in the reserve became either an ally or a distraction. The Valthrek were fighting not just one human, but 1,000 tactics. "Commander," Velkor approached cautiously. "We have a problem. The human and the honey badger have made contact." Raxval turned sharply. "What?" "Surveillance shows they encountered each other in the southern jungle sector 2 hours ago. We expected them to ignore each other or possibly fight. Instead, they appear to be cooperating. Impossible. They are different species. The honey badger is a wild animal. It cannot be tamed or controlled. I agree it should be impossible. But watch this." Velkor activated a recording. The screen showed a thick jungle area. The human emerged from the undergrowth, moving carefully. Moments later, the honey badger appeared from a different direction. The 2 creatures stopped, watching each other. The human slowly sat down, making himself smaller, less threatening. He reached into a crude bag made from plant fibers and pulled out something, meat from a creature he had killed earlier. He tossed the meat toward the honey badger and backed away. The honey badger approached the meat, sniffed it, and ate it, but it kept watching the human. The human made no aggressive moves. He simply sat and waited. After several minutes, the honey badger moved closer. Not friendly, not tame, but not hostile either. The human and the animal seemed to reach an understanding. They were from the same world. They were both being hunted, and together, they might survive. They have been working together since then, Velkor explained. The human creates strategies and traps. The honey badger serves as bait and attacker. They are exponentially more dangerous together. Raxval watched the screen as the recording continued. The human and honey badger moved through the jungle with purpose. They came to an area where one of his warriors was patrolling. The human positioned himself in a tree. The honey badger moved to open ground and began making noise, attracting attention. The warrior, Grelvan, saw the small creature and moved to attack. Easy prey. But as he approached, the human dropped from the tree, swinging a rope made from plant fibers. Attached to the rope was a heavy rock. The improvised weapon struck Grelvan's head with devastating force. His armor cracked. He fell. Before he could recover, the honey badger was on him, attacking the gaps in his armor with vicious precision. The warrior managed to activate his distress beacon before losing consciousness. Raxval watched this with growing horror. These were not prey animals. These were coordinated hunters. The small honey badger had no fear. The human had no quit. Together they were taking apart his elite hunting pack piece by piece. "We need to end this," Raxval said. "Release the Krev beast. If these earth creatures want to hunt, let them face real monsters." The Krev beasts were creatures from a planet with 6 times Earth's gravity. They were massive, armored, and incredibly aggressive. The Valthrek kept them as a last resort, for prey that proved too difficult for normal hunting methods. 3 Krev beasts were released into the hunting grounds. Each one was 4 meters tall and weighed over 2 tons. Their hide was thick enough to stop most weapons. They felt no pain. They had no fear. They existed only to kill. Teho heard the roaring before he saw them. The ground shook with their footsteps. He climbed a tall tree to get a better view and felt his stomach drop. 3 massive creatures were moving through the forest, destroying everything in their path. Trees splintered under their weight. Rocks crumbled beneath their feet. He looked down at Stryker, the honey badger he had reluctantly partnered with. The animal looked up at him, then back at the approaching monsters. For the first time, Stryker seemed to hesitate. Even a honey badger's fearlessness had limits. Teho's mind raced. He could not fight those things directly. His traps would not stop them. His improvised weapons would bounce off their armor. He needed a different approach. "Follow me." he said to Stryker, knowing the animal probably did not understand his words but hoping it understood his tone. We cannot fight them, but we can outsmart them. They moved quickly through the forest with Taiho forming a plan. The Krev beasts were strong and heavily armored, but that meant they were slow, and their size meant they could not navigate tight spaces. Every advantage had a disadvantage. Taiho led them to an area he had scouted earlier. A canyon with steep walls and a narrow passage. Perfect. He worked quickly, gathering specific plants he had identified. These plants produced a sticky sap that ignited easily. He smeared the sap across the canyon walls and floor. When the Krev beasts followed their scent into the canyon, Taiho was ready. He used friction from rocks to create sparks, igniting the sap. The canyon became a wall of fire. The Krev beast roared in rage and pain. Their armor might stop weapons, but it did not stop heat. They thrashed and struggled, trying to escape the flames. One beast turned and fled. The other two became trapped when falling rocks, weakened by the heat, blocked their exit. They were not dead, but they were contained. From the command center, Raxival watched in disbelief. The human had just neutralized his most dangerous weapons using nothing but plants, rocks, and fire. This was not supposed to be possible. Commander, Velcor said quietly, we have lost. These are not prey. We need to stop the hunt and evacuate. No, Raxival growled. I will not be defeated by creatures from a primitive world. Prepare the orbital bombardment. If I cannot hunt them, I will destroy them. Velcor's eyes widened. Commander, that will destroy the entire reserve. All the creatures. All the investments. The Galactic Council will, I don't care. Activate the weapons. 1 hour countdown. Then we sanitize this entire area. In the forest, Taiho felt something change. The air pressure shifted. A deep humming sound came from above. He looked up and saw lights in the sky, bright and getting brighter. Energy building. He did not know the technology, but he understood the meaning. They were going to destroy everything rather than admit defeat. He looked at Stryker. The honey badger looked back at him. Both creatures from Earth, both brought here against their will, both facing death because they refused to be prey. Taiho smiled grimly. He had one last plan. It was desperate. It was probably impossible, but humans did not give up, and honey badgers did not care about impossible. Come on, he said to his unlikely ally. Let's show these aliens what Earth really means. The countdown had reached 45 minutes. High above the hunting grounds, orbital weapons charged with enough energy to turn the entire reserve into molten glass. Raxival watched from the command center, his pride demanding this final solution. If he could not win, he would erase all evidence of his failure. But Taiho Kim had spent the last 3 days studying his captors. He had watched how they moved. He had observed their technology. He had learned their patterns. And he had noticed something crucial. The hunting grounds had power conduits running through them. Energy sources to maintain the force fields, the monitoring systems, the containment areas. And all that energy had to be controlled from somewhere. The fortress, Taiho said to Stryker as they moved through the forest. That is where the command center is. That is where we need to go. The fortress was a massive structure built into the side of a mountain. It was where the Valthrek warriors gathered, where their weapons were stored, where their technology was controlled. It was also heavily defended. Walking in would be suicide, but Taiho had learned something important about the Valthrek. They thought like predators. They expected prey to run away from danger, not toward it. Their defenses were designed to keep creatures inside the hunting grounds, not to stop something from breaking in. Using the knowledge he had gained watching the energy patterns, Taiho led Stryker to a drainage system that carried wastewater out of the fortress. The tunnel was small and disgusting, but it was not defended. The Valthrek had never imagined prey would willingly crawl through such a space. Taiho and Stryker entered the tunnel. The water was toxic and burned their skin. The smell was overwhelming. But they pushed forward. After 20 minutes of crawling through the darkness, they emerged inside the fortress itself, in a maintenance area far from the main corridors. Taiho could hear alarms blaring. The Valthrek were preparing to evacuate before the orbital bombardment. That gave him maybe 30 minutes. He moved quickly through the corridors, staying in shadows, using his knowledge of predator behavior to avoid patrols. Stryker followed, no longer just a wild animal, but something more. The honey badger had learned to trust this human. Where the human went, danger followed. And danger was where honey badgers thrived. They reached the command center level. Guards stood at every entrance. Taiho counted 4 warriors, each fully armed and armored. He had no weapons except crude tools. He had no chance in direct combat. But he had something else. He had Striker. Ready? He whispered to the honey badger. Striker's response was to bare its teeth and tense its muscles. Ready. Taiho created a distraction. He threw a rock down a side corridor, creating noise. 2 guards went to investigate. The moment they left, Striker charged the remaining 2 guards. The guards saw the small creature and laughed. One of them raised his foot to stomp the tiny animal. Striker bit through the warrior's ankle tendon. As that guard fell, Striker leaped onto the second guard's face, claws and teeth finding the vulnerable spots around the helmet. Taiho did not watch. He ran for the command center door, using a piece of metal he had salvaged to short out the lock mechanism. The door opened. He rushed inside. Raxval and Velcor spun around in shock. The human was here, inside their command center, covered in filth, bleeding from a dozen wounds, armed with nothing but rocks and sticks, yet standing there with defiant eyes. Impossible, Raxval breathed. You cannot be here. You are prey. Taiho smiled without humor. No, I am human, and humans stopped being prey a long time ago. Raxval roared and charged. He was 3 times Taiho's size, covered in armor, armed with natural weapons that could tear through steel. But Taiho had studied him. He knew how the Valthrek moved. He knew their tells, their patterns, their blind spots. As Raxval lunged, Taiho dodged to the side, using the alien's momentum against him. He drove his improvised spear, a sharpened piece of metal, into the gap between armor plates at Raxval's shoulder. The commander roared in pain. They fought through the command center. Raxval was stronger and faster, but Taiho was smarter and more desperate. Every time the alien commander struck, Taiho was not there. Every time Raxval thought he had an opening, it was a trap. Velcor moved to help his commander, but Striker burst through the door, still fighting the guards outside. The honey badger saw Velcor reaching for a weapon and immediately attacked. The small earth creature leaped onto the alien's back, biting and clawing with relentless fury. The fight was chaos. Taiho was tiring. He had been running and fighting for days with minimal food and water. His body was reaching its limits. Raxval sensed this and pressed the attack. His claws caught Taiho across the chest, leaving deep cuts. Taiho fell, his vision blurring. Raxval stood over him, ready to deliver the killing blow. You fought well, human, but prey always dies in the end. But Raxval had made a mistake. He had forgotten about the other earth creature. Striker, having disabled Velcor, saw the human in danger. The honey badger did something it had never done before. It helped another species. Striker launched itself at Raxval from behind, targeting the back of the commander's neck where earlier wounds had weakened the armor. Small jaws clamped down on vulnerable flesh. Raxval screamed and spun, trying to dislodge the creature. It was the opening Taiho needed. With his last strength, he grabbed a piece of Valthrek technology from a nearby console. He did not know what it was, but it crackled with energy. He drove it into Raxval's exposed side. The commander of the Valthrek hunters, who had killed for 300 years, who had never known defeat, fell. Not dead, but broken, beaten by a human and a honey badger. Taiho dragged himself to the control console. 20 minutes remained until bombardment. His hands moved over the alien controls, trying to understand the interface. He was a xenobiologist, not an engineer, but science was science. Patterns were patterns. He found the communication system first. Using every language he knew, every mathematical sequence that indicated intelligence, he sent out a distress signal into space. He did not know if anyone would hear it. He did not know if Earth had discovered him missing. But he had to try. Then he focused on the orbital weapons. The countdown continued. 15 minutes. He studied the controls, his scientist's mind working through the alien logic. There. Power flow. Authorization codes. Safety systems 10 minutes. His hands flew across the controls. Striker sat nearby, watching silently. The honey badger was wounded, exhausted, but still alert. Still ready to fight if needed. 5 minutes. Taiho found what he was looking for. The override command, the shutdown sequence, but it required authorization from the commander. He looked at Raxval, who lay bleeding on the floor, barely conscious. Help me, Taiho said, dragging the alien commander toward the console. Help me stop this or we all die. Raxval looked at the human through pain-filled eyes. He had been so certain, so proud. He had thought the Valthrek were the ultimate predators. But this human had taught him otherwise. Prey could become predator. The hunted could become the hunter. Size and strength were not everything. With a trembling claw, Raxval pressed his hand to the authorization scanner. The countdown stopped. The orbital weapons powered down. Taiho collapsed beside the control console, breathing hard. He had done it. He had survived. They had survived. 3 days later, a human ship appeared in orbit. Earth had been searching for Taiho since his disappearance. His distress signal had led them here. When the rescue team arrived, they found something unbelievable. A human xenobiologist and a honey badger, sitting in the command center of an alien fortress, surrounded by defeated alien warriors, the most feared hunters in the galaxy, brought low by creatures from a planet they had dismissed as primitive. First contact had been made, but not the way anyone expected. As Taiho was helped aboard the Earth ship, he insisted Stryker come with him. The honey badger had earned it. The animal had fought beside him, trusted him, helped him survive. In return, Taiho would make sure it got home safely. The Valthrek Empire faced a crisis. Their reputation as ultimate hunters was destroyed. Word spread through the galaxy. Other species began to question the Valthrek dominance. If two small creatures from Earth could defeat their best warriors, what did that say about the Valthrek? What did that say about Earth? Raxval, his wounds healing slowly, was given a choice by his people. Death for his failure or exile. He chose exile. But before he left, he sent a message to Earth, a warning to all species who might think to hunt humans. The message was simple. We thought they were prey. We were wrong. The small one knows no fear. The tall one knows fear but fights anyway. Separately, they are dangerous. Together, they are unstoppable. We learned this lesson with blood and pain. Do not make our mistake. Never underestimate Earth. Taiho returned to Earth a hero, the first human to make contact with alien life. The first human to prove that humanity could survive in a galaxy full of predators. Scientists studied his experiences. Military leaders analyzed his tactics. Everyone wanted to know how he did it. When asked, Taiho always gave the same answer. Humans have been prey before. Long ago, we were hunted by creatures stronger and faster than us. But we learned. We adapted. We thought our way to the top of the food chain. That is what makes us human. Not our strength. Not our size. Our ability to never give up. To learn,